You can feel quite free, but it's also a space that you can try to shape. And therefore, it's a space of responsibility, as you can try to act to orient the futures towards things that you feel comfortable. Are we okay with the headphones here for everyone? Thank you. So my name is Alexis Bonnel. I'm with the French Development Agency in charge of foresight and also part of the Finance in Common Secretariat working on foresight issues. And we are very happy today to engage into a conversation about the possible evolutions of climate finance with a very diverse and interesting and passionate panel about about how we relate to the future. You will hear and we will have an interactive conversation associating, among others, Edgardo Alvarez, who is the Secretary General of ALIDE and the World Federation of DFIs. And ALIDE has put together during FFD4 in Sevilla, has submitted an initiative that is now part of the Sevilla Platform for Action, which is called Foresight for Sustainable Finance. And we will hear more about that and the role of ALIDE in this initiative. But this is the initiative that is bringing us together today to have a more longer-term discussion about how the futures could look like and what are the implications of such possible and plausible futures for today's strategies and actions. We will also be hearing from different climate finance and prominent climate finance stakeholders, including Peter Hiliges, head of climate at KfW. We have Reyes Tirado of the Climate Bonds Initiative, Nancy Sage, the chief climate expert at EIB. We have Marcela Jaramillo from the European Climate Foundation, also working on the 2050 Pathways Platform. 2050, there we have the future embedded in the work of Marcela and of ECF. We have Arjun Toot, who is from the Council on Energy, Environment and Water of India, working on green finance issues. Thanks for being here. Dileimi Orozco from the Instituto Clima y Sociedade. You must be very busy these days because we know you've been working quite a lot with regards to different climate finance reports that have been published and released during this COP to fuel the conversations about how to implement a bright climate future with proper financial interventions. And we also have Gaia Larsen, director at working on climate finance issues at the World Resources Institute, who will also be part of this interactive session. We're still waiting for Jens Zedemun, who will be joining a little later from the Development Cooperation Directorate of the OECD. And this initiative that is bringing us together has associated so far ALIDE, ECF, Finance in Common, ICS, UNEP-FI, and the OECD, and it's of course open to all of those who are interested in bringing a bit more of anticipation and foresight in the discussions around climate finance. But without further ado, and before we enter into a much more interactive exploration of these futures and their implications for today, let me pass the floor to Edgardo Alvarez. You decided on behalf of ALIDE and the rest of this group to submit this proposal during FFD4 in Sevilla to have an initiative gathering all of those who are interested in foresight and the futures of climate and sustainable finance. Can you tell us more about this initiative and your role on all of this? Edgardo.
Thank you. Hello, hello.
Take this one in the meantime. Yes.
Hello. Yes, 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 yes. That's the future. As you know, is unexpected. Thank you, Alexi, for those kind words. It's really a dream come true because it looks like it was yesterday that they were in Sevilla. And you know, Sevilla and Manaus, they have both something in common. Do you know what it is? No, the warmth of the people and the warmth of the climate. You know, you're enjoying this now. So it's a real pleasure to me to be here on behalf of ALIDE, the Latin American Association of Development Financial Institutions, at this gathering that invites to look us ahead, to imagine the kind of world we want to build, because we want to build a new world. Above all, to ask ourselves what role we want to finance to play to shape the future that will become. We're living through an historic turning point. Crises are not longer isolated events. They are systemic, interconnected, and with an increasingly frequently. So it's something that every year, every day you put on the TV and you hear something that is happening on the world. The climate crisis is advancing at a speed that overwhelms our decision-making structures. Inequalities are deepening. Geopolitical conflicts are reshaping the map of business and cooperation. Cooperation and new technologies, while opening unprecedented opportunities, also bring ethical tensions, information asymmetries, and even development among nations and widening digital gaps. I don't know if you hear me, but I'm here. Moreover, the global response to this challenge has historically been slow, despite the commitments already made, from the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change in 1992 to the Paris Agreement in 2015. A span of time that clearly shows the gap between urgency and the pace of implementation. There is still much done to be done, and time is shorter than it seems if we continue moving forward at the same slow pace. In this complex context, sustainable finance can no longer remain a niche or a passing trend. It must become the dominant economic language for the 21st century. It is something that we must keep in mind. At ALIDE, we firmly believe that sustainable finance should not only respond to change, it should anticipate it and lead it. Development finance institutions, with all our experience, our public mandate, and our long-term visions, can and must help shape this new paradigm. We are not here to passively adapt to whatever comes next, but to help guide the directions of transformation. This is what we have to do. The projections toward 2050, developed under the Foresight for Sustainable Finance Initiative, invite us to imagine possible futures. We can picture a scenario of cooperation, one in which the financial systems reconciles with nature and society, and sustainability is no longer seen as a cost or a moral duty, but as very foundation of long-term profitability and stability. In that scenario, regenerative investment gains momentum, and development banks lead models that combine social inclusions and environmental restoration. This direction is consistent with concrete proposals to ban subsidies for highly polluting activities and redirecting those resources through development finance institutions toward sustainable productions and consumptions, to impose fiscal penalties on pollutions while creating compensatory schemes for vulnerable sectors, to sanction greenwashing, allocating those funds to a global climate finance mechanism, and to decisively expand the use of a blended finance for projects with high social and environmental impact that are not yet viable under market conditions. However, we must also consider less encouraging scenarios, as we saw. One where finance turns in what? Resilience comes a luxury, capital concentrates in safe and profitable regions, and the rest of the world is left outside the circle of solutions. It is a future where adaptation is privatized and solidarity fades, where cooperative shrinks, or perhaps one where artificial intelligence dominates financial flows and algorithms replace human judgments, fragmenting the global system into multiple incompatible digital logics. A world where ethics and transparency becomes increasingly blurred. In light of that possibility, recent evidence from extreme events in our region underscores the urgency of accelerating resilient investments and strengthening mid-century carbon neutrality commitments with governments proceeds that ensure alignment between financial flows and the objectives of the Paris Agreement. That brings us to a fundamental question. Do we want to be mere observers of how financial systems evolve, or do we want to be the protagonism of this transformation? At Alide, we are clear about our choice. Our role is to be protagonism. The future we envision is that of regenerative, inclusive, and forward-looking financial system. Yeah? Okay.
Can you try that?
I think our dear Donald is here. It's not okay. I think one of these seconds.
Test.
No problem. Hakuna Matata. Hello. No problem.
Everybody is very patient here because everybody is living the same experience. Sometimes things are working, sometimes they are not.
It happens.
It's
Normally
very
happens.
hot, like you said, so you have.
You've been in Sevilla, I suppose.
I wasn't actually, but I
Oh.
used to live in Kuala Lumpur.
You used to live in Kuala Lumpur. Yeah.
Humid, very hot.
Okay. My final remarks. The future we envision is that of regenerative, inclusive, and forward-looking financial system. One where capital is not an end in itself, but a tool in service of collective well-being and sustainable and stable for our planet. Thank you very much, my dear friends.
Thank you so much, Edgardo. You can keep the mic for now. It's working, so it's precious. Let's keep it there. But thank you so much, Edgardo, including for having facilitated the setting up of this initiative back in Sevilla during FFD4, and for highlighting the commitment to be actors of the future and not to be passive. I know there have been quite a lot of discussions about the role of finance vis-a-vis the real economy. Some saying, well, finance is there to deal with the world as it is, and others saying, no, finance should be an actor of the world as it should be. And I think you've made the point very clear here that that this second approach is the one that resonates with what should be the corporate social responsibility, in particular of public development banks, but more generally of all financial institutions. So now what I would propose to do, if you agree, is to start jumping into these futures. You started mentioning some possible futures that were identified through a series of workshops ahead of FFD4. We will come back to that in a second. But before that, I just wanted to share with you 3-4 considerations to get us into the mood. I don't know if you all realize that something very special happened this year. This year, for the first time ever, we got closer to 2050 than to 2000. So it does make sense to reflect on 2050. What were you doing in 2000? I'm sure you have a memory of what happened there. Well, now let's try to put together things that could become memories in 2050 and possibly bright ones. That's a first point. A second one is that you know this famous saying that that predictions are very difficult, especially if they are about the future. And I think that's very true. I mean, how often we are, a lot of us development financiers or interested in climate finance issues, when you put together a financial instrument, you start putting together an Excel sheet, looking at risks, putting numbers behind all that, etc. And then when reality comes, it's a bit different, sometimes very different, sometimes totally surprising. And all the efforts that you've tried to put in a box, the different possible evolutions of the future are useful, but maybe incomplete to inform the quality of your decisions. So predictions are very difficult, particularly about the future. But then what would be the best way of predicting the future? Well, maybe to invent it is a good way of doing it, and therefore having more agency vis-a-vis this future. And last consideration, when you think about the future and how we relate to the future, we use it all the time. I mean, this morning when all of us prepared for this gathering, we were thinking about it. We were planning a little bit for it, coming to the day for all of our meetings. Everything we do, from very short-term things to very long-term things, are guided by the future. And this is also true when you are a financial institution, because you are an economic stakeholder, very special in the economy. You are probably the main tool that relates individuals, organizations to the futures they want, to the futures that they are imagining, that they would like to see. And finance is a service that helps you buy that future, in a way, in exchange of some payment, interests, and trust, of course, because when you're lending to someone, there's a trust relationship that is put together. So it's a very special topic for finance. And surprisingly, there are not that many financial institutions that are doing foresight or using anticipation as part of their decision-making processes. So that's what the initiative here, Foresight for Sustainable Finance, is trying to address. And we're trying to coalesce interested colleagues on this. But I won't be longer on that. And now let's move to the next slide. I don't know if they are hearing me in the backstage. And we would like to start by having you work a little bit. And we will put on the screen a first question. Next slide, please. There you go. I'm sorry, you have to turn around. Maybe I can read it for you. You don't need to turn around and have issues there. But basically what we wanted to do is if you wish to close your eyes, wake up in 2050, and you get a message from climate finance. An image of what would be the most probable, plausible evolution of climate finance. You get one word when you wake up from climate finance in 2050. What would that world be? It can be invented during 2050. You're not supposed to have words that exist today. It can be a different word. Just think about it for 30 seconds, and in the audience, please also do so. And once you have it, please write it down and keep it. We will use it later towards the end of our presentation. Just think about one word which you could invent that for you could reflect the most plausible evolution of climate finance in 2050. I'll give it 30 more seconds, and for those who are watching live, please also do that if you wish. Even in replay, we will have a replay of this available on the IDFC website. So if anyone wants to do so, please don't hesitate. And if you have that word, then just note it down or keep it in your mind. And then I will have you work a little more. Sorry, and then then we can have an interactive discussion. Next slide, please. Now, let's go back to 2025. And having in mind what you imagined as the most plausible evolution for climate finance in 2050, now I would like you to think about another word. The first word that would come to mind regarding what would need to change today in climate finance. What would be the most important thing that you would like to change today in climate finance if you had a magic wand and you would be able? Here, you cannot invent a new world. You have to use the existing words. But I would encourage you to just think about what needs to change in climate finance today and what is the first word that comes to mind when you think about that. I will give you 30 seconds for that as well. And keep it in your minds or write it down, and we will come back to that a little later. Hope you have it now in the audience as well. And so with this, one question to all, and maybe we can just raise our hands in the audience as well if you wish. Is the most plausible evolution of climate finance that you imagined? Is it also the most desirable one? Is anyone thinking about something or has thought about something in 2050 that is very much desirable? Please raise your hands if some of you have thought about something very desirable, hesitating. All right, so we have a few hands raised, but not all. This means that for what I could say a majority here in the audience and our panelists, we have a plausible future which is probably not the most desirable one. So we need to do something, right? And things need to change. We'll come back later to those who had a matching plausible and desirable future. But let's start from the idea that maybe some things need to change if the most plausible route is not the most desirable one. Next slide, please. Edgardo touched very quickly on a series of scenarios. I will go quickly through that, and you have that also on your paper that we've distributed. So sorry for those in the panel who need to turn their backs to the screen. But ahead of FFD4 back in June, July, and during FFD4, we had a series of foresight workshops. A few of you participated. Many others are new to this conversation. But we had about 50 interested colleagues from across the financial sector who started working on different scenarios, some of which were summarized by Edgardo, with the idea of putting together plausible yet contrasted scenarios about the futures of climate finance. And we ended up choosing 3 scenarios based on all of these workshops. One that is probably a desirable one, return on regeneration, we called it. Another one called fortress finance, where you have where resilience is a luxury and access to financial services to help you out for that is only there for a few, and then you have all the others who are in a much worse position, including with limited access to financial resources. And then we had a third scenario where you had fragmented intelligence taking over, and not in a homogeneous way across the world, but different regions having different approaches to fragmented intelligence. These machines are also political. I mean, the algorithms, the way you train them, etc., they generate different things, and so you have different approaches to what sustainability means embedded in different types of fragmented intelligence, and fragmented intelligence is ruling the way finance is allocated. So we imagine that world. And in all of these worlds, we thought, well, what should we do today to try to avoid evolutions that we don't like, and to try to promote evolutions that in all of these plausible scenarios, they're plausible, maybe not all with high probability, but you know, COVID was not high probability, and we had it. So what could be done also to take the best out of that? And following that, and I will be very quick on this, but we put together an online foresight survey, which we will continue having online on the website of this IDFC COP30 webpage and other web pages. So for those who are interested, you can click on the survey and complete it. But ahead of COP, we had a series of financial stakeholders replying to the survey, and I just wanted to quickly present some of the results of this survey now. Next slide, please. So we had this survey about exploring the futures of climate finance, and some of you, I think, responded to that. Next slide, please. This survey was about trying to get even more thoughts about how people in the financial space are thinking about the future. And so we firstly asked what type of climate world they were imagining as being most plausible in 2050, from being able to remain between the 1.5 degree story to being at the other extreme in a climate stress world. Next slide, please. And so here are the results from the about 40 to 50 respondents we have so far on this survey, coming from all parts of the world, or all types of institutions, development banks, think tanks, private sector institutions, government representatives, regulators. And many of them were thinking, well, maybe the most plausible future is that we have a fragmented transition.
Sorry, is this public, Alex?
This will be made public After COP, absolutely, and then a third about of those who responded saying, well, we will get there, but it will be delayed, and we will overshoot, but in the end we will make it. So a bit more positive. Next slide, please. As part of the different questions, I'm not going through all of the results of this survey, but we asked those who were interested to tell us. In general terms, if they had one direction, one broad direction for how climate finance could evolve by 2050, what would that be? Then we can start comparing notes with the world, with the word you put together. Next slide, please. And the response there was that most of those who responded thought maybe this fortified fortress finance world where you have wealthy bankable zones that manage to be resilient and other zones which are very vulnerable and left behind. This was, you know, one of the most plausible evolutions imagined. The second one being a market metamorphosis. So we're not too far, which is much more positive, where you still remain in a market-driven world, but the regulations make it so that they integrate competition is still dominating, but the market logic still integrates elements of climate and sustainability. Next slide, please. Then we had a question about the general structural trends that people think are weighing a lot on the future of climate finance. Next slide, please. And there, what was dominant basically is that the climate tipping points were coming out very strongly as one of the main trends that will affect the future of climate finance. But right after that, the geopolitical fragmentation was also a major element that was highlighted as a structural concern to the futures of climate finance. Next slide, please. Another question we asked beyond structural trends were about signals of change. And what could be signals of things that are already happening but could become structural trends in the future? Next slide, please. And there, the responses were overwhelmingly about AI and data-driven transformations and digitalization. But also resilience and new forms of resilience and risk pooling was also right after the digital elements highlighted as one of the major signals of change in the landscape of climate finance. Next slide, please. I'm coming to the end, and I will leave the floor for conversations right after. But more interestingly, we also asked about disruptions. You know, the unknown sometimes, or things that are quite uncertain, but that could really be game-changing. And here the respondents said, well, there could be systemic shocks, among which loss of insurability, that was highlighted as a major element because if the world becomes uninsurable, then a lot of the financial system is in a big trouble. AI, of course, and going all the way to AI-led allocation of finance, so no more human intervention in the way finance is allocated. Can you imagine that? Of course, regulation overhaul could also be a big disruption. Technological breakthroughs, geoengineering was highlighted quite a few times as being a major element that could really disrupt a lot. When you think about geoengineering, there are more and more solutions that less and less people can implement, and even private interests could do so. So that could be a game changer. Then in terms of ethics and geopolitics, of course, some disruptions were also highlighted. Next slide, please. And I'm coming to the end. I will be back to you in a second. We also asked respondents to tell us more about some blind spots that they think need to be covered in today's financial agenda for climate. What is missing in the discussions today? And this is connected, of course, to the previous considerations. But basically, adaptation, even though we talk a lot about it, still remains largely underfunded and is therefore considered as a blind spot. Nature and biodiversity integration, not enough there. We need to do more. Same for social and just transition. Basically, all of these elements are about talking about climate in a broader sense and embedding it into development issues, which a lot of the respondents thought, even though we're talking a lot about it, it's still something that needs to be further promoted. In terms of governance, translating commitments into into implementation is also an issue that, of course, is the topic of this COP, but in the agenda and in the survey that came out. And I will not go through everything, but I just wanted to highlight one that also came out of the FFD4 discussions in Sevilla about AI. If AI is to play a bigger role tomorrow, then maybe the financial sector should get more involved in its regulation. And how much of us, how many of us are working in this area? That's a question that was opened by the survey. Next slide, please. So last thing, coming back to today's world, what should be the top priority, having in mind the futures that are at hand? And next slide, please. Here the respondents put together the importance of rewriting financial regulations, scaling adaptation, but also building enabling environments as being key elements that we should really focus on. These are on the table here, so that's good news. But these are also the most difficult things that need to be done. So I will stop there. Next slide, please. That's a quick presentation of the survey results. We will put this together in a short report and make this available, of course. But now we would like to have some reactions from some of you, and then open the floor to all of you. Starting maybe with Nancy. What does all of this inspire you? And you, as prominent climate finance expert and leader at EIB, how are you using the futures in your work and in your strategic making?
Thank you very much, Alexis. Does me? So I'm not supposed to tell you the words now, right? So okay, I'm just checking. Okay, so first of all, thank you for inviting me and the EIB. So for those of you that don't know, the EIB is EU's bank. It's also the climate bank, and we do business in the EU, about 90%, and about 10% of our business in developing countries all around the world, which is about 9 billion euro a year in developing countries. So just in case you don't know who we are. And I'm the chief climate change expert. So I'm always looking ahead, as you said, although perhaps sometimes doing a bit of quality assurance. It's a great thing, right? This is a bit wibbly wobbly. Do I just go closer? Okay, I'll try. So, okay, but the bank is also a long-term investment.
Sorry for this.
The bank is a long-term investor. So, you know, we don't disinvest from things. So when we think about transition, we're thinking about our clients transitioning. What are we financing to make the change? And what are we doing to support and encourage our clients? Because our portfolio is not something that you can adjust by changing your investment strategy. Your portfolio, when you're lending for 15, 20, 25 years, your portfolio is going to be changed by interacting with those clients, not by calling in a 25-year loan, which you can't do anyway. So having said that, what do I think? Well, I'm having to say that for the start, I have to think that there still will be the EU, and the bank will still be working in the EU and outside in developing countries. That's my starting point. Will we still need to be a climate bank? I think we'll probably need to be a climate and environment bank. And I think that all banks will need to be sustainable banks. I think that will have become the norm. Otherwise, they will have gone out of business. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I think. As you said, obviously, when we look to 2050, and it's good to be reminded it's only 25 years away, actually. It's a bit shocking, but I already get quite upset when people talk a lot about net zero. And I don't mind whether they're talking about 2040, 2050, or 2060. What I get upset about is when they talk about that as the goal. It's a Paris goal. No, it's not the goal. The goal is a temperature so that we can live safely and successfully on the planet. And net zero is the end state of the pathway that we take. And you can have net zero with 3 or 4 degrees, and that is not a world that we want to live in or hand on to our children. So we have to focus on 2030 and 2035, and what we do then totally affects where we are in 2050. So if I have one wish, it's that we all keep reminding everybody about that. The critical decade is now, and you know, 2045, 2050, 2060, okay, we can discuss and developing countries have more time, but the critical thing is now. So finance, well, we are in a fourth industrial revolution, and finance fuels industrial revolutions. We're actually in two at the same time. So it's the AI and decarbonization. Industrial revolutions are happening at the same time. But there was one thing I think that was missing on your slide, which to me is vital, and I think it's a blind spot. I think it's interesting, Alexis, that you didn't have it on the slide. So it's even a blind spot maybe for you, and that's circularity. To my mind, the winners, when we look at 2050, will be those that understood not just decarbonization, but the fact that the whole of the industry they're in has to become circular and not linear. And that's also linked to the growing wish for countries to be autonomous in their material supply and so on. So I'm really seeing that finance for circularity and the blind spot of industry and governments and finance to be really focusing on that. I think the winners will come flying out, those that are actually addressing that. Now, I believe also that the winners in 2050 will be those that bet on the green transition. If you look at the three previous industrial revolutions, what we conventionally talk of in the 1800s, 1850s industrial revolution in farming and industry, if you look at horses to vehicles, combustion engine vehicles, if you look at computing in the 1960s and 70s, the winning regions, the winning countries and the winning companies were those that bet on the transition. And there's always discussion on the people being left behind and the companies being left behind. But the transition still happens, and the winners are those that bet at the front. So my feeling is that 2050, the winners and the people we'll be financing are those that bet on the green transition. And I'm sorry to say, others will probably just have been lost in the time in between. But just transition will still be absolutely massive. Some of the hard to abate sectors and the big industries will still be at the tail end of their decarbonization, and I do believe that finance for regions and people to totally give new economic purpose to regions that previously were built on those industries is going to be still something, especially for public banks, that we're doing. And I think that transition finance will still be there, but it will be really focused on the last remaining hard to abate sectors and supporting countries that are still, trying to reach that end state. Technologies will have changed, so I don't know what the green finance will be targeting, and maybe it will still be solar panels, and maybe we will have come up with some new ideas. I don't know, but for sure, I do believe that finance for the overshoot and pulling back to a safe level of CO2 will have become absolutely imperative. And so therefore, I think that as well as just transition and adaptation finance, we will be massively more incentivized for nature restoration. And it will not be a niche. It will have become a demand from countries, a demand from people that we need to pull back. We've understood, we probably will have passed some tipping points. And so I'm thinking that finance for restoring nature and oceans will have become absolutely imperative.
So much, Nancy, for all of these insights, and for highlighting the fact that there are still many blind spots there, and that's what this initiative is trying to do, is to bring perspectives together so that we minimize the amount of blind spots by combining them all. But indeed, circularity is a major element that didn't come out from the survey. And I like very much the overshoot finance concept, along with maybe catastrophe finance to deal with the tipping points, but maybe new roles for finance there that we should prepare for. Why not? Right from today. Let me now hand the floor to Marcela Jaramillo, if I may. Marcela, you deal with 2050 horizons every day. So tell us more about it, your work, and how you relate to the futures, and how you bring. What do you bring back from these futures for today's actions?
Thank you so much. Can you hear me, Alexis? Thank you so much. Very happy to be here. I'm very happy also to see all this work that has been taking place. This strategic foresight work is actually a core part of the European Climate Foundation, where we are actually sitting, and we created a strategic foresight unit back in 2022 because we know that this is a core element to be able to make the decisions now for where we really need to be tackling in the future. And particularly, we really see that these type of exercises are helping us to tackle difficult questions, like these ones that we are discussing today, help us to find common ground, and also understand where do we need to go to prepare for what is coming. So for us, it's really a pleasure to be working with you and to collaborate with FD, who has been doing this type of work for really long, and being a leader on this area from the start. And really connecting it to some of the other, in addition, work that we do in the countries. I will say that this type of work is really valuable because it really helps us to look at the big picture, take a step back, and understand where the priorities may lay. And understanding those priorities is so important, especially in a moment of constrained resources and capacities. We really need to be looking at where do we need to put our efforts, where the biggest transformations can help us to move to the future that we want and away from the risks futures that we are seeing. Looking at the scenarios that you share, something that I will say strike me, but does not surprise me, but continue to kind of worries me, is that the three scenarios had an underpinning element to me, which was inequality and fragmentation. And I think that's actually kind of one of the biggest kind of challenges that we have together with climate at the moment. Really, how do we turn ourselves to how do we help to really tackle that? Because that is going to be part of whether we make it or not as well to a safer climate. So this exercise really brings us back to focus. How can we collectively, don't forget about that is part of what we need to do. And I think it also put quite a lot of good light into resilience as a luxury. That for me was really, I cannot forget that line, because this is something that's striking now as well, the urgency to really tackle resilience and adaptation in a much more coherent and at a bigger scale. Like, this is urgent and we need to tackle. So these two issues came for me really quite strong. And actually, they connect very closely to my everyday work with countries on 2050 pathways. So we work with countries to help them to look how the strategy and the transition will look for them. And I will say that in the last 2 years, there are two elements that have been growing the most. And the question on distributional impacts, like how is the transition actually going to affect different people in the country and how we are going to bring them around this. It's not about, well, we were talking here about winners and losers. We really need to make sure that we are working around to protect a lot of people and to bring them as part of the transition. So distributional impacts, social protection, and we have increasingly been working with countries on resilience and adaptation planning for the long term, which is also complex, but is essential to identify those pain points that we need to be paying attention right now. Now, maybe just to say that this work is fantastic because, yeah, we're looking at these risks. These two are things, the inequality and the resilience and adaptation, we need to pay much more serious attention to that. But it's also really helpful because it points us to solutions. And there were already some that you capture in the futures that I also am seeing emerging, and it may be something that we need to invest more. And that is, how are we thinking about new ways of collaboration? Particularly, I'm starting to see a lot of South-South collaboration and new ways to connect and to create new coalitions. I think that is going to be part of the solution and something that we should definitely continue to enhance, to create those solutions of the future. And really, maybe even to continue this conversation, I think it will be really fantastic to maybe start connecting these scenarios of the financial sector with some of these scenarios that we're seeing from the countries and the transitions. In particularly, how can we better look or think about these two issues, right? Resilience and adaptation, from what we're seeing, what it means for countries specifically, and what would that mean for new tools and financial approaches to really make those a new way forward. And also, how are we going to keep the whole system human, which I think is part also of this AI concern that we have, this anxiety as well, this bigger scale, and how we keep it human and close, and that is part of the inequality question, right? So we'll be super curious to continue to explore some of those questions to find more solutions to those key issues.
Thank you, Marcela. That's wonderful, and you've gave very good examples of what you can bring from the future to help you focus on key issues. And indeed, I mean, I had not realized that inequality was embedded in all of the scenarios that have been imagined so far through this initiative, implicitly or explicitly. Just as a reminder, these scenarios, they're not from me. They're from a collective group that together imagine different possible evolutions. So that's what is coming from collective intelligence and imagination. And it's striking indeed to see that there are some key features that we can already see coming out from that can invite to focus today's action on certain things a little more, given those plausible futures that we have ahead. And absolutely, let's try to have that also done at country level and cross that with country pathways and long-term strategies. Wonderful. May I turn now to Reyes, if I may, and have also your reactions on all of what we've been discussing.
Can you hear me? Yes, good. Thank you for this, Alexis. I think this panel and this event so far has been super interesting and really opening our minds a lot into what the next 25 years might mean. I'm Reyes Tirado from Climate Bonds Initiative. But when you started, and I'm going to tell a bit of a personal thing, when you started asking what were we doing in 20,000, I thought at the beginning it was 2020 because, yeah, we're all with COVID. But then I said, no, it's 25 years ago. So it's both that a lot can happen in 25 years, but it comes very quickly. I was finishing my PhD in Spain on things related to ecosystems, integrity, and agriculture. And if you had asked me at that time if I was going to have anything to do with the financial world, probably I could say that was not in my imagination. But now I feel that, as others was mentioning, financial sector is more than an actor. It's kind of the driver in anything that needs to happen to keep this planet livable for all of us. So this journey for the last 25 years, which to me has been, super striking, I feel very much connected to that in the sense that, yes, for the next 25 years, we also need to find ways to make this really disruptive. So concretely on your questions, I start with the words that came when we were thinking about, what is the 2050 we want to see. For me, two words came. It's like two ends, this thing about different ends. So anyway, the green financial sector should be both normal and natural. The sense that, as Nancy was saying, all banks should be green banks, and the financial sector should consider climate and nature as part of what they do, core to their strategy. So it's not going to be optional of like the 10% that we have now. It will have to be the mainstream if we're really to have a planet that we all can live in. To do that, there was this thing about, either is 45 islands or is a market that has metamorphized. And I think, as Marcela was saying, those two can be very similar in the structure of the financial sector. The difference is where they are and who they're serving. So the 45 island model is like, okay, there's pockets of very good green, very good structure, very good, return. And then there are pockets of super bad credit worthiness and stuff. So, but to change that, I think this is the key for us. What do we need to do to make that market that is going to be normal and nature accessible to all? And this is where I feel there's three elements I feel in the future, thinking about this more regenerative system, is that we are basically piloting drivers in a very chaotic situation that is only going to get more chaotic. So we're going to see more disruptions coming our way. This is bad, of course, and it's going to cause a lot of suffering, but it's also an opportunity. But to make use of that opportunity, we need to have a very clear path, a very clear chart of what things we want to do. And I mean, I could say more of these things here, but I will just say for us in Climate Bonds, one of the elements of that chart is having clear taxonomies. Taxonomies being, what is good, what is bad, so that it's ready when one of these moments of crisis arrive that we don't really know where to go, what to do, we already have this chart ready. Instead of saying, this is a list of the things you can do when a disaster comes that is going to benefit not only adaptation, but mitigation, but temperature, and justice included. So this is about taxonomies. And the second is resilience. I think we've talked about this a lot and we all agree, but I think it's also we need to be strategic about how do we finance resilience. There's capital in one side. We always hear this dichotomy. There's a lot of capital, but it's not in the right places, but we're going to need a lot of capital. So how do we channel the capital to the places where it needs to be? And for us, the thinking we've been doing on resilience is going to be mostly funded by public sources. So this is where public sources and development banks should kind of prioritize and see, okay, this is something the private market probably doesn't have a lot of, will have some role, but not a lot. But then focus the private into the other stuff that needs to happen, like all the new infrastructure that we're going to need, the all EVs and renewable energies, all the mitigation options that can also be profitable, with the public sources being the guarantee. And in that way, maybe it's a engineering that we can do to bring the two together. I will leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Reyes, and for reminding us of how close it was 2000 after all, and how different it is 2025 already. So think about 2050. And I also enjoyed so much the way you were framing taxonomies vis-a-vis the future as a potential safety net, if I could reformulate it like that. To help us be more future-proof, it's good to have some taxonomies that you can rely on. Even if they're not implemented today, they can be helpful tomorrow. It's a very important point on top of the one on resilience, of course. Arjun, for this first round of reactions, I would now like to turn to you and hear from you and the perspective also of the Council on Energy, Environment and Water, and from India. What are your perspectives vis-a-vis the future, and how do you use them in your work?
Thank you, Alexi. Firstly, I'd like to say that the format of this event is outstanding. It's so refreshing and so different from the usual panels. So when I was reflecting on the three scenarios that was, as you said, an outcome of collective intelligence, what struck me, apart from what already the speakers have said so far, is that in two of those scenarios, there is a loss of agency. Right. In one instance, there are enclaves where, of course, that have access to resilient infrastructure and investments, but resilience is a luxury, and not everybody has that agency, and you can't make the decision anymore. Right, it's out of your hands. In another scenario, finance is in control of AI. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it can be a bad thing if the intelligence does not share your values. So again, there is a loss of agency for many. What is striking is, or that is what is striking. Coming to the present, we have the agency right now. So that is why it is important to act when you have the agency and not, lose yourself to a future where that is no longer in your control. So what do we need to do to actually craft a future that is more in line with scenario one, that is, a more pleasant sort of a thought? Currently, the way that we value economic output leaves out so much in terms of negative externalities of economic activities. We do not value emissions correctly. We do not value nature correctly. We do not value material use, circularity correctly. So, and finance never leads. Finance only follows. Finance follows cues of risks and return. For those of you who do a bit of salsa or a partner dance, it's a bit like giving a lead to your partner. If you give the right lead, will the partner execute the right turn? So if finance is not given the right lead, how will it know where to turn? So we need to change the incentives of finance, and more fundamentally, the way that we value economic output. So there is a lot of work that says that investment in climate adaptation, $1 of investment in climate adaptation leads to multiples in avoided losses. We need to codify these in a formal framework so that it's possible to price the value, or price, another way of saying is to value, nature-based solutions, or even non-nature-based solutions, but that which advance resilience, right? So investment and adaptation that advance resilience. And it's providing a valuable service. It should be priced correctly. Same thing applies to circularity. Now, for all of this, of course, financial supervisors and regulators globally are taking some steps to integrate climate considerations into capital flows. It's a process that is at various stages around the world. Some regulators are ahead, some regulators are behind. But I would argue that so far, it's not entirely being factored into credit ratings. Another area to look at is how ratings agencies are actually making their determinations. Are we actually factoring all of these considerations into ratings? I would argue that one of the later phases of evolution of pricing climate risk into regulation is to have a standardized framework for pricing nature, emissions, adaptation, circularity into credit ratings. Because only when you change the cost of capital will the finance flow. So the projects that are not bankable these today for in adaptation, because they say there's no revenue model, there is no business model. If you're pricing the services correctly, a private sector investor can charge in coordination, because these are public goods. So in coordination with a public entity, if a private sector operator can charge a user fee for the services provided by resilient infrastructure and charge that to businesses operating in the region, you have a business model. That's because you're valuing the service correctly. If you're valuing the service correctly, and basically in terms of ratings, you have superior cost of capital, and then finance follows. So remember, I said finance always follows; it never leads. You have to create the conditions for it to follow in the right direction. And again, I'm going to end by saying, paraphrasing, something what you said. Basically, there is so much uncertainty in the future, you can't really predict it. The only way to predict it is to create the future. And this is what I'm saying, that we can create the future today. We have the agency today. Let's create it before we lose that agency.
What a call for more agency, and we've hearing this a lot in this COP, in other fora. It's sometimes implicit, but this call to action, particularly from the financial stakeholders, to be more proactive, I think resonates a lot with what you said, and it's very interesting to see that in some of the scenarios that don't look so bright, that have been imagined through this initiative by a collective group of stakeholders. They're not bright because there's not a lot of agency. We lost it, and I thought that parallel is super interesting. So even more important to put all our efforts into making sure that we keep and we expand this type of agency. Let me now transition to a second part of the conversation with a few other speakers. But before I transition, I just wanted to hear from those who have not spoken yet. I asked you at the beginning, to all of you, a word reflecting or describing how you would think about climate finance in 2050, the most plausible evolution, and what would be your priority today. For those of you who have not spoken, I will be calling you now. Can you start your intervention just by saying that word for the future plausible evolution in 2050 and what you need to change today? And let us know also if, and you're allowed to, of course, if having heard from the different speakers here, you'd like to change that word. you can. And I'm not asking for a new word, but if you are hesitating after the first thought and after having heard, you're allowed to do so. I don't know if I could start with you, Peter, and have you not only share your words about the plausible evolution in 2050 and what would need to be changed today. Tell us if you think you'd be ready even to change them, having heard all of us. And of course, tell us from KfW's perspective how you're using the futures in all of what you do. Before you start, I just wanted to highlight that as part of this initiative, we started charting a little bit different development banks who have undertaken concrete foresight work in the past 15 years. KfW is one of them, particularly for domestic interventions. You've had a foresight unit doing quite a lot of work in this area. There are not that many, but you're one of those. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Alexi. Well, you've thrown so many questions and keywords at me that I'm sorry no one of you will ever talk again, because there's so much to think about. Now, I find this very inspirational. Thank you to all of you who've already spoken and thrown ideas and thoughts and our room. But Alexi, let me start with my 2050 word. Actually, what I noted down was repair. And Nancy used the word restoration, so I might use that instead, but because it's more intellectual. But repair was what came to my mind. And the word for 2025 to me was sharing. So sharing what we have, sharing resources, reallocating stuff, getting out of our existing zones of comfort, where I think we are wrongly placed right now and we're defending it too much, our zone of comfort, and sharing is beyond, say, the philosophical sharing of loving your neighbor. It really means sharing power, resources, access, and all these things in a much more dramatic way. So that's what I have noted down. Just to add, what did I do in 2000? I just started my career in development finance. I was doing the first couple of renewable energy projects, and then I isolated tiny space of KfW, which was not mainstreamed, which was not part of the big game, but which was like the orchid of financing, next to all the coal-fired power plants. And looking at that and where we've come today, also me personally, but also the institution, it's dramatic. But it's not enough. So let me cry a little bit. So what else did you want to ask?
How you're using the futures in your strategic elaboration and decision making, and how you would like these futures to be best used.
Honestly speaking, since you mentioned already, it's the domestic part of KfW which is using it. It's not my part. We are the development bank, international finance for emerging economies and developing countries. So we've just gone through a kind of reorientation program, strategizing for the future under current circumstances, but not with a view at which I think is a weakness. So we have been reshaping our mission with a view at today, change in politics, geopolitics, resources, budgets, so these kind of things. And to me, it really makes a difference to look at futures scenarios, the ones that you've been putting on the screen, explaining to us. This is kind of wobbly, Nancy said. Okay, I keep changing every 2 minutes. To me, what really strikes me out of the discussion so far and the 3 scenarios that have been put on the table, first, your loss of agency, that is really something I will take home, because I think it's really framing all of my thoughts when it comes to thinking about the next 20 years, that this is a risk that we are facing. And it also, you find it in different words in my notes, because what I'm looking at is total reshaping of, say, the actor landscape, the planetary system of climate finance, with changes in the private sector side, changes in technology, changes in country positions in the global geopolitical system, but also economy-wise, power-wise. And we might still think in old terms of, okay, we are the center of the world in Europe. We are going to tell everyone what needs to be done, and missing totally that there are so many other players popping up here and there, and they are shaping the world, not us. What does it mean for KfW? And it also fits into the scenarios when you say an AI-controlled world, or the fortresses of some big players. It all means the same in a way to KfW. We need to find our own space where we can still shape things and not being objects of others. And that, maybe as a final word, drives me back to IDFC. We're kind of a supranational network, very informal, of 27 banks. It has a lot of potential because it can help us stay relevant in the climate finance space in the long term as well, even if the world around us is reshaped. But I think we don't do enough for that. I think it's too informal, IDFC. I think it's too loose. There's too much of, okay, I let you do what you want to do, so I do something else. And so it has to become more formalized in a way, more coherent and more of a common objective network. So to put it that way. So I finish here.
You. Thanks a lot, Peter, and also for playing the game, the game, and the we're having uncertainty management throughout this event, but that's part of the story, right? That's what the future is made of. So that's a good reminder from including from technology and the machines that things are not given necessarily. So sorry for the technical glitches, but thanks for all of these thoughts and also for putting yet again the agency issue on top. And what I got from one of your messages is that it is possible to get out of your comfort zone and have more agency, and it might be even needed to go out of your comfort zone to fuel more and more the way you can be an agent for the future, because you have a better understanding of different other perspectives. So I like that also very much. And the call for IDFC to take this agenda on board is also, I think, well heard by AFD as another member of IDFC. May I now turn to Dileimi Orozco, Instituto Clima y Sociedade. You've been a great sponsor of this Foresight for Sustainable Finance initiative, helping us putting together the survey that we presented a few minutes ago. And you're also super heavily involved in a lot of the climate finance discussions here at COP30 with you and your team, having facilitated fantastic discussions leading to a lot of very important recommendations that I think are already sending signals to the financial sector. But in doing so, tell us more about how you're using the futures in your work and the way you're approaching your work.
Yeah, sure. I think it was very interesting in some of these discussions. I was supporting part of the work of the Circle Finance Ministers on the Baku to Berlin roadmap. And I think having to think about 10, 20 years ahead of time with the conditions that we are thinking, trying to see how the Minister of Finance think also about the world, is it makes you think, how can you push the boundary but also sustain the sort of the precautionary approach the Minister of Finance always have about the financial system. So I think, if I may, one of the things that I was thinking when you asked us about the word, and it's related to this, is about, and came up in the discussions about, one of the pillars of the Circle of Finance Ministers, Baku to Berlin roadmap, is prudential regulation. And one of the things that has come up, and it's not only in this space, has been in G20 and G7 and other areas, and other venues, is around that tension that we have between financial stability and adaptability. And I think that's something that, goes back to two things. One, we talk about financial sector being a driver. Who is behind the driver? Who governs the financial sector? We never question that too much. So we always talk about the financial sector as an abstract actor, but there is more than that. I think we forget the loss of agency that you mentioned, and it's back to what's the role of the regulators and ultimately the government. And I would like to talk about the state rather than governments, because governments change, but the institutions that sustain the sort of they provide the continuity, right? I think that's something that we forget, and I wonder, when doing that work, I thought that was very interesting. What I saw was very interesting, that despite the fact the central bankers weren't part of the conversation on the Baku to Berlin roadmap, we're seeing elements of the prudential regulation, Basel III, insurance being embedded in these spaces, and that's a first. I think we still don't have the central bankers in yet, despite that they have the network in the financial system. They still are an external club. We have the Minister of Finance being more involved in the discussion. So to me, when we were I didn't write the report, I just provide advice. But when thinking about that, is like, how can we push the boundaries? Exactly how you said. How can we get out of our comfort zone and start thinking in a different way? And how can we use the different levers at hand, considering that the conditions might change in the future? So the words that I have in my mind were, when you ask us, were about trust. I want to see 2050. I see like a world where there is more trust. It just relates to your sharing, and also predictability. And an element that, although is not about the financial sector, but came up a lot on the Baku to Berlin roadmap, at least for the Circle of Finance Ministers, was around domestic resource mobilization. And there was around strengthening the capacity of governments and the institutions that already exist at the national level. That's something that it not only it is perceived as only something happened. Okay, that shouldn't be in the Baku to Berlin roadmap because that's not what the NCQG says. But when you look at who determines the rules, who determines the advice that the countries have to follow, are supranational institutions, and that's something that is interlinked, and those are the elements that we need to consider. Sorry, that was a long-winded way of saying getting out of the comfort zone, like you suggested. That's something that's always in my mind. How can we push the boundaries from the point of view of those that are trying to do their best within the constraints they have, and make them feel comfortable, and generating trust that they can do better, and will be welcome if they do.
Thank you so much, and for making the connection with the current discussions and the implications that futures thinking may have also with this role of regulators slowly but surely getting more and more into the conversation. And as Peter said, getting out of the comfort zone. It's not bad, and when you make a detour into the futures, it's usually easier to get out of your comfort zone, because anyway, we are all out of our comfort zone. When we're thinking about 2050, we don't know how it will be like. So we're by definition structurally out of our comfort zone. And so it's a way of promoting that going into the futures. Gaia, you've been working for long, and you're an observer, but also an actor of the making of the new financial architecture from WRI. With your analytical work, convening power, you've been involved as an institution for very many years in trying to shape this financial architecture to make it fit for purpose for the future. Can you tell us a little more how you're using these futures in your own work, and what this discussion has inspired you, including in terms of the words that you chose for describing what would be the future of the most plausible future for climate finance in 2050, and what you would change in one word today?
Okay. Oh, and it is working. No, thank you so much, Alexei, and that was a very generous, I think, introduction. Well, my word for the future, I'm not sure if it's plausible, but I feel like it should be, was just finance. Like, it's not climate finance anymore, it's just finance, right? And I think other people have mentioned that as well. We don't have to differentiate between the two. And climate finance becomes a slightly, I mean, it's probably still a word a little bit out there, but also a little bit old school, right? And the word I had for the current situation is fragmentation. Like, I guess it goes along a little bit with some of the scenarios of, we are sort of headed already right in a direction where, yes, in some places finance flows relatively well, and in other places it doesn't. And then there's lots of different types of fragmentation between different types of funding, between the same type of funding but different actors, between countries, between solutions. So a word that it makes me, so when we talk about the first word that I had, which was finance, it makes me think of, okay, we should mainstream, right, climate into, and that's what we're doing, I think, working on for a number of years now, right, trying to mainstream the climate awareness and data, et cetera, into financial decision making. But then I also think of it, I think it's what we don't do as much as mainstreaming the other way. So I'm thinking back as to, like, over the last decade or so, what were some major impacts on climate finance? Well, there was the pandemic. There's war in Ukraine. There's AI. There political shifts, especially in U.S. where I live. And the climate people were not necessarily, I don't know, I mean, maybe some of you are, and that's fantastic, but are we also being able to integrate those risks into our models and into our, the potential future? Because if we're just looking at, well, this is what what might happen with the climate, and this is what we should do with the climate, and the rational steps that we should take, and not considering all these other things that are actually going to have a huge impact, then we're not as effective as we can be, right? Now, of course, that's a huge task. It's a huge task to just look at the climate side, let alone whatever other, pandemics. I think pollution, it's not, it is climate and it's not climate, but it's another issue, the plastics, etc. These like things that are small or big shocks that can also come and impact, and yet do we mainstream that enough into our current thinking so that we can understand going forward? The AI one should have been, I think, relatively easy to predict in a way, and yet it seems we're kind of surprised, like, oh my gosh, now all this energy has to go to AI, and how are we going to deal with that? So I'm sure there were some people that were predicting it, but were we all talking about it 10 years ago? No, right? So I hope that we can kind of more integrate, risk thinking generally and climate, but also other things, so that we're not caught surprised by these other impacts that come in and make our lives more difficult. Which is sort of depressing, because then it just is like piling on lots of things. But I'm sure it'll be great in the end. Uplifting.
Thank you, Gaia, including for the positive note at the end, and the importance of this mainstreaming of other considerations. I think foresight is also a tool that that can help very imperfectly, because you cannot be predictive, of course, but that can help open your eyes to all the other factors that may have an impact on what you're doing. And it's very difficult, even if climate is already a very big space, it's also a silo. Actually, the world is a much more complex and systemic thing, and we need to be aware of other things, and that's also a possibility, or one tool that can help you get out of your comfort zone, as we've been mentioning in this conversation. We've been joined by Jens Zedemun. Thank you, Jens, from the OECD, your team leader at the Development Cooperation Directorate. We've been asking here colleagues about one word that would describe the most plausible evolution of climate finance in 2050, and another one about what you would like to change today, knowing what could happen in 2050. So I will not ask you out of the blue to answer those two questions, but just for you to know where the conversation, how the conversation started. I just wanted maybe you to share with us a little bit what the OECD is doing in terms of foresight work, because you're working very hard for better policies for better lives. And you are one of these few organizations that has included foresight as a tool to achieve that. We would be quite interested to learn a little more about that and how you're relating to the futures. And also, well, thank you for having been one of the co-organizers and co-sponsors of this Foresight for Sustainable Finance initiative since the outset, because the initial idea started in year 2000 as part of the first Finance in Common Summit, and OECD was there one of the key players that helped develop this type of conversations. So, Jens?
Now it seems to be working. I hear myself now. Okay. That's good. Now, okay. Many thanks, Alexis. So, and I would like to first say thanks also to AfD, also as a great partner and supporter of the foresight work, including in the OECD context. And I think at this point we are actually in a phase where we need to define what the next focus is, but the importance of foresight in the long-term perspective, obviously, I think that is a key thing where, it goes back to the question of, what are plausible things that that can happen? How do they shape and affect, key policy agendas? And I think that is the basic hook in terms of development, in terms of climate, and given basically that climate is a long-term agenda. I mean, it's very urgent to act now, but at the same time, it's bound to run over the next decades. That foresight angle, I think, is absolutely essential. Now, what I think is always key, and maybe just to come back to some of the questions that you said, just to say I very much agree with what I heard when we talk about climate finance, but I think at the end of the day, it should just be part of finance, because fundamentally climate action, I think it's
Try this one.
the climate agenda, it's basically at the end of the day, it's well, let's say sound climate action is sound economic policy, sound financial policy, sound development policy, and that's the fundamental point. So it's really about thinking about the climate change in terms of the very real concrete impacts that it has on human society and human economy, and that's, I think, what it drives. Then I think what is really is to associate the foresight with some of the things that we know about the longer term future. I think there's quite a lot of knowledge on what is going to happen with different emission scenarios. What are some of the impacts? But there's more that we know, and I think that's what I just heard a bit at the last when I arrived at the intervention from Peter. I mean, the world is changing. The world economy, the weight in the world economy is changing. We're at the cusp of a high income world. For the first time ever, probably, we're about to reach an average income that is basically that of a high income country. The economic shifts are changing. The demographics are changing, and I think that is a very important factor also that can be projected decades into the future with quite a high degree of certainty, and that has a lot of impact on economies, but also on questions of demands and supply, etc. So finally, I think we heard the point about AI technology. Technology will be an absolute factor in shaping what we're going to see in the climate space. Foresight-wise, it's very hard to predict sometimes. We heard about maybe the challenge of predicting AI. There's a question now, how much of that, how will that evolve? Is there a bubble in there? What is happening with all the data demands for energy, etc.? But I don't want to pretend that I have the answers. I'm just laying out some of the issues there. But just to say, fundamentally, going back to the point, I think foresight will be essential to have a strategic view of being prepared of changes that will happen at some point, and being able to integrate them and react to them in an efficient way. And fundamentally, just getting back to the point that I made earlier, to say that at the end of the day, hopefully we'll just won't need climate finance, just as we don't need health finance, we don't need education finance. I mean, it's a bit different, but just because it's the right thing to do, and it's the economically, the socially, and the financially right thing to do. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jens, and also thanks for all the work and the inspiration that OECD is bringing to the whole community, because you've kept foresight for quite a long time already as part of one of your key elements in your agenda, and that has been extremely helpful. Now, before we turn to Edgardo for just one final thought, and I see time is running. Just for those who didn't share their words about most plausible 2050 evolution and today's priority, could you do so now? I mean, who would like to start? And Peter, I think you have to go. Yes, we will be closing in a couple of minutes. I don't know, Arjun?
So for 2050, I made up a word because you said that was a possibility. So my word is quasi veritas. What that means is that I hope by 2050 we are some way towards correctly valuing nature and climate and all the things that Jens said. So we're sort of there, but not quite there. So quasi veritas. And what we need to do today is to start that process to, value economic output correctly for financial supervisors to give the right cues so that we're valuing climate, nature, circularity, and indeed development correctly, and so that it percolates down to the cost of capital, and therefore finance follows in its wake.
Wonderful, thank you. Anyone else would like to share who has not shared yet? Yes, Marcela?
Thank you. I had the same one as you, actually, just finance. And then when you say you can't make out the word, I made out a word, but I don't know if that was a good idea. But it was basically now finance, like that's what it is, just like what is now finance. But for today, I just put really like shifting. I put basically the same like you, shifting. But I also had that about trust, because I think that will be essential for any shift in that. Yeah, so that.
Keep trust in changing times. That's the challenge. Maybe that could bring together these agendas. Anyone else would like to share? I don't know, or from the audience. Oh yes, yes, please, Ray.
I mean, if someone was from the audience, it's also very good.
Yeah, please, Karel from the.
My name is Karel Koonenberg. I'm from the Council of Europe Development Bank. Well, I had the word none for 2050. But there are two scenarios. The positive scenario is that it has become just finance. The negative scenario is that it has become, I would say, a too politically sensitive word. Basically, the result of a world that is governed by, I would say, equal access to quality information, and actually a fragmentation because of that. So it's very much the combination of the second and the third scenario. Why is it relevant for us? We are an organization that is based upon human rights. Human rights are, I would say, universal. We will still have them in 2050. And one of the, I would say, things that have not been discussed here is actually access to quality information being really at threat for 2050, and in our view, has a potential also to I would say, impact the way we look at climate finance.
Thank you so much, Karel. And indeed, access to quality information. Maybe this could include also access to information about plausible scenarios imagined collectively. That could be part of it. I don't know. Reyes?
Yes, so I guess can you hear me? Yes. The word was, like many you, finance, this is the normal, this is the natural. What do we need to do today? And I've come from the outside the financial world. I think for me, a word is clarity. So as you were saying, a lot of these things, these risks and these are not integrated into the climate discussion, often because they're not clear enough for people who are working in science or in lobby or in other aspects. It's not, or the civil society or the projects on the ground in emerging countries. They don't have the capacity to understand this language. So I guess from us now in the financial market, trying to get this goes back to taxonomy and having a chart, but having clarity in what we mean and that can be articulated, I think can be a very big force of changing this architecture. Thank you.
Thank you, Reyes. And allowed, yes, maybe Marcelo, you have to go, right? Or yes, sorry. We will just hand the floor now to Edgardo for some final words and maybe a focus on public development banks, because you are heading the secretariat, general secretariat of ALIDE, the Association of Latin American Development Banks, but you're also heading currently the World Federation of DFIs. So what this conversation could mean for development banks, and we will close with that.
Thank you. Hello, hello, hello. Do you hear me? Yes. Okay, good. First of all, I came from banks, as you know, as as you said, and I will mention something. The banks are the ones who can make your dreams come true. And you know this because if you are a banker and you work and you have finance a small farmer and a small people, and you know that when he goes to the bank, he have something in mind. He wants to improve his income and to improve the way how the family will go. And if you provide the funds and they will pay it back, because if you give the money, the money have to come back to the bank. It's good. So the banks are crucial, we think are the architects of the system change. And we must be the catalyst of transitions, but as Peter said, but he is not here, it not only must come from the top to the bottom, must come from the bottom to the top, as you say, because not only in banks we know what we're talking about, but mostly people from outside of the system, they don't know what exactly we're doing. My word was resilience and inclusion adaptation at these times. This is something like this. The banks must be the architects of cooperation. We can do anything alone. Together we can do more. And we must be managers of anticipation. We must anticipate the change and to see what's going on and how we can help the people, because that's why we are here. The banks are not only to make profits, and the development banks are not to make profit. They are just to make and improve the income of the people of the countries they are. And we also must work with as a quasi-regulators together with the regulators and central banks in order to make them clear, because we are closer to the people than they are. They are just in the top thinking on what's good. We are here, and the people on the ground are there. So we can be the something in between. And finally, what we think is the sustainable finance of the future, it will not be just green. It will be inclusive, digital, cooperative, and regenerative. It will be guided by a logic of shared responsibility and transparency. And together, our financial institution must act as the central point of convergence between innovation, public policy, and social well-being. So I'm positive. I'm really optimistic in the future. I just came from Old Dubai. I don't know if you know what happened in Old Dubai 2.5 million years ago. There was the first Homo habilis, and after this was the Homo erectus, and we were being processing the human being is being changing and adapting to the climate. So I think we will do this in the future, and we are really optimistic we will do, and the finance sector has a key point on that. Thank you, my friends, to be here.
Thank you so much, Edgardo, and for all of those who are interested to join this this conversation, because there will be follow-ups, including with publications relating to the online survey and the scenarios that we've discussed. You are most welcome. This is an open-ended initiative, and we're looking forward to a lot more foresight explorations together. And let me just close by saying what I was doing in year 2000, because that's where foresight started for me, actually. And it's actually true. I look back, it was in year 2000. I was in the subway in Paris, going to work on a Monday morning. It was not a very nice day outside, and I had a lot of things in my head. And at some point, I saw a quote in one advertisement in the subway, a quote from a French writer, Jean Cocteau. The quote says, "The poet remembers the future." And I stood there, even missed my station, looking at that quote and thinking, wow, maybe this is something I should investigate a little more. So that encouraged me in my personal experience to start looking at foresight and anticipation. And it's a lot more than poetry. It's actually about agency, and you've said it very clearly. And we see this initiative as a tool to encourage the financial stakeholders to be more actors of the future. So more to come. Thank you so much for all your remarks and for being here and for supporting this this initiative. And we look forward to continuing this conversation very soon. Thank you so much, and wishing you all the best for the future.